SoundCartel. What really drives success in today's workplace, and are we focusing on the wrong things? Professor Darius Pfitzner, Academic Dean at the Australian Institute of Business, joins us to share insights he's learned throughout his fascinating career, from aircraft engineer to leading business academic. He highlights the value of failure, humility, and focusing on the customer. We then hear from emotional intelligence specialist Amy Jacobson, who explains how emotional intelligence, or EQ, can transform teams. Amy offers 5 practical steps to build a more empathetic, accountable and high-performing workplace. Together, Darius and Amy reveal why great leadership is both learned and deeply human. From SoundCartel, I'm Grace Jennings-Edquist, and this is Business Essentials. Our first guest is Darius Pfitzner, Academic Dean at the Australian Institute of Business. He's one of Australia's leading business academics, but it's been a long and deeply interesting journey to get where he is today. From serving in the Navy as an aircraft engineer, to selling fudge in his family's regional gift shop, to becoming a computer whiz and business developer. In this interview, Darius shares some of the key lessons he's learned along his journey from cockpit to campus, including the value of failing often and learning humility. To get things started, Darius describes his current role to Jeff Waters.
I'm the Academic Dean for the Australian Institute of Business, and I basically manage everything about our courses and ensure that we're accredited, that all of our staff are happy and performing well, that all of our students are very happy and having a great learning experience, doesn't matter where in the world they are, and that everything runs smoothly.
And your institute specialises in business subjects and business degrees, is that right?
It does. We deliver online MBAs. We're actually the largest online MBA deliverer in Australia. We also deliver business research qualifications, Masters of Management, PhDs and DBAs.
So that's a fairly high-level academic job. I believe you come from Charles Darwin University before this, but you didn't actually start off as an academic, did you, Darius? You're actually an engineer.
Well, yes. Well, as with all people, we follow various roads and paths, and life pushes and pulls us in many different directions. In my professional career, I started off in the Royal Australian Navy as a helicopter mechanic, called an aircraft engineer, if you will. I wouldn't use the word engineering in the university space because that's a very different engineer. But certainly well qualified, a 4-year qualification there just to work on helicopters in the Navy, and did that for 8 years.
I see. And how did you get to where you are now from the position of fixing helicopters?
I think helicopters, aircraft engineer, if you will, was a sideline for me, an interest from a young fella that loved cars and engines and working on machinery back in the day. But really, I think the writing was on the wall from birth, because my mother, often would tell the story to all friends and family, and often to my own chagrin there, embarrassment in front of people, that, I was born, and not too many days later, I was under the front counter of the hardware store there in Darwin, and she was busy doing business, if you will, in one of the first businesses they opened. And, of course, after that, they opened many different businesses. So I was sort of soaked in this environment of business and management and entrepreneurship, both very entrepreneurial parents. And so, as I say, maybe the mechanic thing was a bit of a sideline until eventually I realised, well, actually, this is a little boring, because in aircraft engineering, everything's documented. You don't want anything new, so everything's well understood. So it's a little bit, open the book, what do we do now? And my style of, personally, I was looking for a lot of interest. So I ended up leaving the Navy after 8 years and going and working with mum and dad and opening up a number of stores with them. I started out doing very well, believe it or not, selling stained glass and making stained glass in Brisbane there. Not too long after that, I got a feel for the sort of the business area and opened up my own renovations business where we sold retail business, where we sold staircases and banister rails and decorative cornices and doorknobs and all that sort of thing. And and that went fairly well. Eventually, my parents said, look, we're going to open up a chain of tourist locations in Queensland, and that was very interesting for me. So I said, oh, count me in. I started out as the baker, ended up as the business developer in Montville on the Sunshine Coast there.
Beautiful spot. Know it well.
Lovely. We were at Yandina initially there at the ginger factory in Yandina, and then we moved up to Montville. Opened another shop in Montville. Explosive success there. Just, some of the days of just absolutely pounding the cash register and restocking the shelves and all that sort of thing. Buses turning up and really flogging all the staff to death, but very great success. We opened up in Mount Tamborine. And Mount Tamborine was just the next step again in terms of busyness.
So you've got fairly wide experience there in small business by the sound of it. Where did the penny drop and you decided that an academic life was going to suit you so well?
Again, more of an evolution, I guess, personally, rather than the decision. Yes, there was a decision made, but I found myself in Mount Tamborine. We installed some fudge making equipment there. We'd made fudge in the other locations, but we installed it there and we started selling fudge. And I ended up in this situation where we could not keep up with the sale of the fudge. As fast as, in all truth, as fast as I could make it, it was walking out the door. We had, 15 different flavours, everything from peppermint all the way to the traditional chocolate and, cappuccino and all this sort of thing. And we just couldn't keep up with it. And so I was thinking there was a process solution there. Being an engineer, there's always a procedure or a process, the Navy speaking a little bit as well. I did a little bit of research.
You needed to become the Model T Ford of fudge.
Apparently, yes, you could describe it like that indeed. Yes. Although we had more colours than the Model T Ford did.
Yes, you wouldn't want black fudge.
But they were in the days, and they're probably showing my age now, they were in the days where we didn't have computers for research. We had to use libraries and read books and a lot of reading, a lot of research. But I eventually stumbled on this concept of price elasticity of demand. And it wasn't really that, it was just the suggestion that you can regulate demand with price. And so I went out and started playing with price. And at one point, I'd almost doubled the price of the fudge that we were selling it at. And we still didn't realise any drop-off in sales. And of course, my dad found out about this. He said, you can't sell it for that much. And I said, yeah, but our sales haven't gone down. We're still breaking records, Dad. Oh, well, that's probably a good thing then. But I think that was the start. And so it really, it showed me that the acquiring mind as an individual really drove me from there. And I started looking at what else there was. And I eventually found myself going, well, if I was going to go back to study, because I'd already done literally 4 years of study and qualification in the Navy, and I didn't stop qualifying while I was in the Navy as well, what would I like? I'd already done some business with my brother-in-law, and we had a cookie-making factory. We sold shortbreads, macadamia shortbreads, and we marketed that into Hong Kong and Taiwan. And that went fairly well, and that's where the bakery experience came from, and then the natural extension into what Mum and Dad was doing there. And so I sort of went, well, I'd like to do international business. So I bit the bullet and said, see you all later, I'm going to go back and study. And it didn't stop from there. Business was the first point of call, the business qualification. I studied at Flinders University. I finished that. I realised that computers were starting to come on and that really the future was going to be in computers. I better learn something about that. I did a graduate degree in computer science and did so well. I naturally fell into that, did so well, ended up falling into a Masters of Information Technology. And while I was doing that, I published a paper on user interface optimization because I was interested, and my head of the AI department at Flinders there spotted this and said, why don't you do a PhD? And well, it was all a fait accompli from there. Finished the PhD, got headhunted by CDU, and here we are today, many years later, having an interview.
That's a fantastic story. You clearly bring a lot of experience to this position in teaching other people about business. What are the key things? It's a hard question, I know, but what are the key things that you take away from your life that you've learnt as a result of being at the coalface, if you like?
At a personal level, I would suggest it's humility. Being able to put your ego away, listen to other people, recognise when your own assumptions are driving a decision rather than having, data-driven decisions, and really learn from the customer, learn from other businesses, if you will. I mean, the best form of research is look at your competition that's successful and look at what they're doing. And of course, in terms of operationally, there's a number of key things, skills that an individual needs. You need to master your finances. You need to put the customer first. These are well-recognised facts in business. You need to build great teams. You need to have teams that are confident in what they do, authorised to make decisions on the spot, supported by the organisation itself. And I guess something that many people wouldn't like to admit to, but being willing to fail. Turn failure into the art of learning. And from that point of view, be willing to fail often, fail for as cheap, if not for free, and use that as as part of your learning process. Test and test again. And if you do that, you'll do no less than offer a product that the customer wants in the same time period that they want it, at the right price, and you'll make money.
That was Darius Pfitzner, Academic Dean at the Australian Institute of Business. Now to emotional intelligence and how it can transform teams. How emotionally intelligent is your workplace, and could toxic or unproductive relationships be holding you back? Emotional intelligence specialist Amy Jacobson believes EQ is a skill anyone can develop, and that it has the power to completely transform businesses. Amy shares her top tips to build an emotionally intelligent workplace. She focuses on self-awareness, emotional accountability, empathy, effective communication, and decisive action. She starts by telling Jeff Waters what role emotions tend to play in workplace conflict today.
Our emotions come from our subconscious mind, and when we're surrounded by people, even when we're around one person, it is the impact that we have on each other that will determine the success of that interaction. And it's our emotional brain or our emotional mind that's actually driving that interaction that comes into play. So when you have people in a workplace that have either different emotional responses, or they have different values and beliefs, they have different neural pathways in their mind, when things happen, you're going to get different emotional responses. And when those different emotional responses come into play, it is very hard for our mind to accept that we are responding one way and they are responding another way. It comes with that fact that, our mind has the need to be right. And we've wired ourselves that way, right? Like if you look at our whole upbringing, we're rewarded for being right or for getting the right answer. So when we are around people who have a different answer or a different response or a different emotional reaction, that is what tends to cause that conflict. And that is when our mind is saying, why?
Yeah, we react badly, they react badly. Oh my God.
That's right. And I think, Jeff, one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we tend to think that a situation or a person can make us feel a certain way, but they actually can't. A situation happens and people happen, but the way we respond is a choice. And that choice is based on the neural pathway, the wiring in our mind due to our values and beliefs. And
yeah, they're just speaking up, not necessarily meaning to make you angry.
That's exactly right. And the reason why we know this is that you can have 10 people in a situation, 10 people from across the world, and the exact same situation happens, and you can have 10 different emotional responses. And that shows us that it's not the situation that's causing the emotional response. The situation happens, but based on the values and beliefs that they have embedded and how they've wired their neural pathways in their mind that lead to an emotional response, that's what happens. And that's why, if you're in the same country and in very similar values and beliefs and cultures, then you might have very similar emotional responses. but it's not the situation that's causing it. It is just the fact that your values and beliefs are aligned. So at some point in time, you're going to come across people that have different values, that have different beliefs, that have different wiring in their mind. And when that happens, that is where there is a disconnect between the emotional response and what leads to conflict.
Okay, so I spot this in my workplace. There's conflict between me and a colleague, me and a partner, me and an employee. How can I stop this from happening?
Okay, so if we have a look at it, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to own the fact that you're playing a role in it. So we get stuck in our own head and we often think it's not me, it's them. And that's the first thing we've got to accept, is the fact that they might not be wrong, you might not be right. There might not be a right or wrong in the situation. You've got to get out of your own head and you've got to start to understand, okay, why is this person responding in this way? What is the clash that's actually happening? And what is it that, is underlying those values and beliefs that are differing? And it's being able to accept the fact that every single one of us is different and we're going to bring different approaches. And we cannot control and we cannot change anyone else in this world. All we can choose to do is control how we choose to respond. So you've got to have a look at that conflict and understand, what is driving the conflict? What are the emotions that are coming from it? What is the outcome that I want here? Because ultimately, if you both work together and neither of you plan to go anywhere, you've got to make this work. So how can you actually make this work? And it's not about changing you or changing them. It's about understanding and working together. So leveraging the fact that, okay, I might be a highly detailed top-level summary person. They might be a really analytical question reporting kind of person. So how do we leverage those skills together? How do we work together rather than just thinking they need to be a clone of me or, that they're a failed version of me? You've got to be open to actually finding the crossover, the way that you work together rather than trying to change them or force them to be you.
All right. Are there any other things that I need to know if in the hypothetical situation where I spot conflict between two people I'm managing, as opposed to me being involved and I see this conflict? Obviously, to shortcut, you put yourself in their position, or you think the way they're thinking, or try to put yourself in their position and rationalize the source of what's going on. But are there any specific differences in approach that you need?
There absolutely is. So as somebody on the outside, as a leader or another colleague that's looking at this happening, you've got to actually understand the situation from every angle. And it is about understanding, it's about being able to listen to find out what is the emotion that each person is actually feeling and coming to it from that humanistic side. Now, the steps that I would say to coming into any difficult conversation like that or any clash or conflict that you have, the first thing you should be doing is asking open questions. You shouldn't be going in with any assumptions or any facts. Go in asking open questions, and with those open questions, just listen and pause. Just pause for yourself and listen to the actual emotions and the answers that are coming with it.
Take it slowly and think about things. Because you've got your own emotional reaction to the situation, you might be really annoyed with these people.
That's exactly right. And there are very few of us out there that like any form of conflict or like having to deal with other people's forms of conflict. So our amygdala is really alert at that point in time because it's looking for, we might be feeling that fear of confrontation, that fear of the unknown that we're going in. So you've got to be careful not to make assumptions and to over prepare before you even get yourself involved in these situations. You've got to go in with an open mind and just ask the right questions to understand. Listen and pause to them. And then it's that key skill of empathy. It's that key skill of not just chasing or following the situation and the words that they are saying, but actually follow the emotion that they are feeling. Because quite often what is causing a conflict between two people, the surface problem that you're seeing is not the real problem. The real problem is actually a lot deeper than that. And if you just fix that surface problem, you're just putting a Band-Aid on it and something else will come up to cause that conflict. You've got to understand deep down, why is it that these two people are not seeing eye to eye? And what is the learning for both of them in order to be able to work together? And this is where this next question of how do we fix this comes in. And it's such a powerful question, because and sometimes we have to ask it 4 or 5 times, because we've got to get the people to get out of their own head and get into that kind of that forward thinking solution mode. So the first couple of times you ask, how do we fix this between the two people, you might still get a lot of emotion that comes out and says, well, it's their fault and they shouldn't have said this. And if they stop doing that, and really coming out with those accusations. But if you repeat that question to them to say, how do we fix this? How do we fix this? Then it forces them to look at that reality, to own that reality, to own their emotions, and then for them to move forward and go into that understanding of how the other person is feeling. And if neither of us are going anywhere, then how do we make this work? How do we bring that humanistic side back into relationships and accept the fact that we are different people, we are going to have different opinions, and that's okay. But maybe it's the way in which we communicate. Maybe it's the level of respect. Maybe it's the trust element. There's got to be something in there. There's got to be some clear actions in there in order for you to be able to pick it up and move into that solution mode, rather than getting stuck in the he said, she said side.
That was emotional intelligence specialist Amy Jacobson. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. Follow Business Essentials podcast across social media and head to businessessentialspodcast.au for more. Business Essentials is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Nicole Goodman and myself. Technical production is by Pete Letts. I'm Grace Jennings-Edquist. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Business Essentials next week. SoundCartel.